Hello again, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for Friday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service. Up first, we've got high wind warnings out here for the eastern Alaska range through the passes west of the Tok Cutoff, and that's out until about 1 p.m. tomorrow afternoon or midday tomorrow, say, for those winds to continue. Actually, they're coming up now. They'll continue to come up tonight and through tomorrow morning. Continue to blow again, gusts 75 miles an hour farther to the west. Near the Alaska range for the northern Kuskokwim Valley there, wind advisories looking for gusts 55 miles an hour during the same time period. And here for the other advisory area, that's a flood advisory for the Resurrection River near Seward for minor flooding due to the 4 to 5 inches of rain that's going to fall or has already been going on, but should accumulate 4 to 5 inches over the southern Kenai Peninsula by tomorrow afternoon. And so looking for some minor flooding there, and that is out until tomorrow afternoon, I think early, at least at this point in time, the advisory, at which point they'll either cancel it or kick it out longer. Otherwise, on the satellite pictures and the loop showing low pressure weakening as it rolls up the southwest coast here. Brought some pretty good winds, 42 as high as 55 miles an hour in gusts earlier today, but it's weakening. Those winds slowly coming down during the afternoon, but not ending. And some rain here with this bent back occlusion part of the system there in across mainly Yukon Delta today. More showery here through the interior behind the front. That's getting into western Cook Inlet, and that kicking the winds and rain up here significantly throughout the day today across south central Alaska. And turning an arm, strong winds, mountainous terrain, hillside of Anchorage, and rain spreading into the Prince William Sound area. And that also kicking the winds up over the eastern Alaska range in the 40 to 55 mile per hour range this afternoon. And a band of precipitation rolling northward with this system, anywhere from 1 to 2 tenths associated with that. And up along the Arctic coast, some clouds there, giving areas of light snow and fog, but amounts quite light. They're not really measurable. Another trough right through here, colder, unstable air after very mild conditions with this front, especially overnight last night. Temperatures in the 50s for the lows, south central Alaska, North Gulf Coast, and down the Kenai Peninsula. Colder air back behind this front will be coming in. That could kick off some possible small hail here, especially along the southwest coast later tonight into early tomorrow. A breakout over the central Aleutians, farther to the west, a huge cloud shield associated with the next storm that's going to be rolling in with gale force winds and rain into the western Aleutians, eventually in toward the central areas during the day tomorrow. And for the southeast coast, not too bad there today. Seeing some cirrus show up along the north coast. Otherwise, on satellite imagery, look like a few breaks there under the influence of the high pressure area here that's just south of the Queen Charlottes, especially over the southern areas. Clouds on the increase, generally dry there. In fact, no rain, at least through 3 p.m., has made it over to Yakutat yet, but the rain and wind definitely increases as you head west along over toward Prince William Sound, the Kenai Peninsula, seeing gusts 72 miles per hour recorded at McHugh Creek, turning an arm there on the Seward Highway, and 60 to 70 plus over the Anchorage hillside. Anchorage International Airport seeing gusts 40 miles an hour, and again 40 to 50 mile an hour wind gusts up there along the Alaska range, like around Delta, for example. Otherwise, lighter winds in the interior with a much slacker gradient. Low clouds, fog, flurries along the central Arctic coast, locally into the North Slope. Some of that did get down into the Arctic Village area with some low visibilities, a little fog and flurry conditions there. Showers here back along the coast. Again, those winds pretty gusty, especially early on, coming down this afternoon with a weakening low that's really not going to move too much here over the next 24 hours. And down to the south, the developing system here along that frontal boundary. And then out to the west, the rain, fog, increasing winds just now getting into the Shimya area for tonight. That low center cuts just south of the area there. That's going to bring gale force winds with it on the north side, and that'll be spreading in toward Atka late tonight, more likely tomorrow. Isolated showers lingering there over the eastern Aleutians, and kind of unsettled, wet and breezy for the Pribilofs. Same thing here along the southwest coast, so that low, more or less holding stationary there off the coast, and this trough. So winds will gradually be diminishing, but they're not going to end completely. Neither will the rain and fog. Better here over the Kuskokwim Valley. Rain heavy at times, southern Kenai Peninsula, up onto the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound. As this system lifts northward, winds will be back increasing gale force, in fact, eventually storm force for the Gulf of Alaska tomorrow, with heavy rain developing now over towards Yakutat, Cordova, spreading into the Panhandle, staying fair to the south under the domination of that high pressure area over British Columbia. No change for the Arctic coast. And for Saturday, that system oozes its way into the central interior. In fact, by the afternoon, probably just have one low center as it kind of just transfers itself inland and weakens. But as it does that, look for gale force winds in Prince William Sound, storm force winds, Gulf of Alaska, heavy rains, Seward Peninsula. Starting to taper off. We're starting to become lighter late in the afternoon tomorrow, or during the afternoon, as the whole thing shifts eastward with the strong winds and heavier rain pushing in toward the eastern North Gulf Coast and trying to slide into the Panhandle. Stays dry down to the south with continuing high pressure there over the Queen Charlotte's and into British Columbia. Starting to retreat a little bit there, and that's going to allow a little more moisture in as the pattern shifts eastward. Showers, mostly cloudy back to the west. Still some possible flurries there. Central Arctic coast, maybe the extreme eastern Brooks Range. Next system here, sliding eastward just south of the Aleutians with gale force northerlies. On the backside of it, gale force southeasterlies ahead of the front, heading in toward the Fox Islands. Still low pressure off the Nunivak Island there. That'll affect areas from the Pribilofs. Not too windy there, but still pretty damp and unsettled. And showers or areas of rain right up to the southwest coast. Trying to dry out there over Bristol Bay. Moving ahead to Sunday, looking like this. Much drier over the interior, as you can see, especially south of the Brooks Range. North of the Brooks Range, looks like the North Slope, eastern Beaufort Sea coast. Pretty good chance of some light snow, fog, definitely cloudy skies. Less of that back out to the west. And then south of there, look for partly, maybe mostly sunny for the eastern Tanana Valley, mid-Tanana Valley. 40-mile country into the Copper River Basin. Should be dry for the North Gulf Coast. Isolated showers now for the Kenai Peninsula. So much drier conditions than what you see tomorrow and tonight here for the south central Alaska areas. But southeast flow bringing more rain, fog back into Kodiak Island. Lower flying conditions there. Probably IFR on the east side of the island. And this trough has rain, kind of that old frontal boundary left over, actually what this is. And high pressure retreats back to the south. So it looks like a pretty wet day. But rainfall amounts won't be all that heavy for the central and northern panhandle. Southern areas, Annette, Ketchikan, Metlakatla, maybe even Hyder, staying dry possibly through the day. And again, gale force winds, call it here for the Alaska Peninsula. Pribilofs, increasing wind, rain along the southwest coast. Maybe staying under gale force. Could be gale force south of Nunivak Island late in the day. And definitely gale force north-northwesterlies right in across the central Aleutians there. Could see gusts 50, maybe 60 miles an hour with that or so. But lighter winds, less gradients in close to the low center for the Fox Islands, but pretty wet conditions. Looking at the lows for tonight, coldest as usual up here over the northeast interior, down into the mid-teens. Otherwise, under mild southerly flow here, still lows a little cooler than what we saw this morning. Forecast down into the 40s for south central Alaska, upper 30s, lower 40s out to the southwest coast. 20s, central Arctic coast, lower to mid 40s for the Aleutians, southeast coast 40 to 45. Highs for tomorrow afternoon, mid 50s at the best there for the Panhandle, and lower 50s south central Alaska, upper 40s, lower 50s, cooler conditions coming in. And upper 40s to mid 40s back to the southwest coast, near or a little below freezing central eastern Arctic coast, a little above freezing on the west side, mid 40s for the Seward Peninsula, and near 50 for the Aleutians. Lows the following morning, not much change out there, lows near 50. Upper 20s, mid to upper 20s for the Arctic coast on the east side, mid 40s in the Tanana Valley, and near 50 again for south central Alaska, lower 50s for the Alaska Peninsula.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Flying weather, big area IFR here from the Pribilofs on up toward St. Matthew Island, but west of Nunivak Island, marginal along the coast here. Through the Bering Strait, IFR from, say, Wainwright Point Lay or so, probably more Wainwright eastward there, and then just right along the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. Areas of marginal VFR, mostly through the west central interior here, IFR along the Alaska Range, western and central areas, and the Gulf of Alaska, Prince William Sound, North Gulf Coast to about Yakutat, marginal over the Panhandle, VFR down south. And in the afternoon, marginal VFR from roughly Port Alexander northward there to the border, VFR down south. Marginal VFR right along the coast range, and Prince William Sound, though, bringing out the VFR and some marginal VFR. Turnagain Arm, Portage, Passage Canal, Portage Glacier, Kenai Peninsula up across the Talkeetnas. Improving, though, along the Alaska Range gradually. Big chunk IFR there over the central interior, and IFR mostly on the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, IFR over the northern Bering, and the Aleutians. Sunday morning, IFR, central interior here, north across Koyukuk Valley to the Brooks Range eastward, and then north to the eastern Arctic coast. Another patch there of IFR on the west side. IFR also south side of the Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island, on down to the southwest. Improving here over the central western Aleutians, becoming VFR in some areas. Marginal VFR from about Adak eastward to another boundary here, so IFR there for the Fox Islands, VFR breaking out for Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, improving here over much of southern Alaska. And then for the afternoon, really not too bad, just some patchy areas of marginal VFR, otherwise the interior looking really good. IFR down over the southern, central, southeast coast, marginal for the North Gulf Coast to Prince William Sound, Kenai Peninsula. IFR here, another front boundary right through here, IFR in the upslope areas of the Alaska Peninsula. Pribilofs wrapping back around and across Atka Island and then to about Nikolsky. Marginal will become VFR out towards Shumianatu. Passes Anatuvik tomorrow. Marginal VFR for both passes Anatuvik and Adigan with the lowest conditions on the southern approaches. Could be IFR at times and get this going the right direction. There we go, Adigan. Marginal VFR in the pass, IFR, southern entrance, and Lake Clark and Merrill. IFR to start, gradually becoming marginal, especially from southwest to northeast throughout the day, but I think rainy will be IFR all day long. Windy, southern entrance, IFR, otherwise marginal to VFR in the northern entrance. And Isabel, IFR at times, and Mentasta, occasionally marginal. Tanita, marginal VFR, and it looks like with some wraparound moisture coming in from the west-southwest, it'll go IFR in the afternoon, later in the afternoon. Portage, just the other way around, starting out IFR, becoming marginal. Chilkoot and White, marginal VFR. And for the freezing levels, about 4,000 feet up here over the northeast interior, 2,000 kind of undulating there across the Brooks Range. Much of the Bering Sea about 2,000 feet, really not much gradient out here. You can see kind of pushing south, another upper level low here near Nunivak Island. And then the main gradient along the North Gulf Coast and across the Panhandle, anywhere from 2,000 to 8,000 feet. And for icing, above about 5,000 here for the areas central Aleutians. Could be probably considerable moderate there for the central to just southwest of Nikolsky. Otherwise, icing could be a little bit of considerable moderate, otherwise light to isolated moderate of the mixed varieties here. And then pretty good chance of some heavier icing occurring over the North Gulf Coast here from roughly about Yakutat in toward Elfin Cove. And then some isolated moderate up through the central interior, but about 4,000 feet across the Brooks Range to the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. Jet stream, next system, well actually this low coming northward today will kind of become stationary tonight through tomorrow and then gradually weaken as this next one drives eastward here with the stronger jet. Otherwise southwest flow about 125 knots in across southeast Alaska, ridging popping up over the Panhandle. 9,000 feet though, pretty good winds across the southeast coast of this level, anywhere from 25 to 50 knots, and 15 to 30 in the Gulf of Alaska. Lighter here through the central eastern interior with that low center there. Northeast 10 to 15, pick up these 25, and 40 knots southerlies, turn northwest 50 on the other side of that system, and turbulence pretty bumpy here North Gulf Coast, southwest coast, and the Aleutians.
We always knew the site was there, but we thought it was gone due to erosion. My grandfather would tell about the bow and arrow wars, about two kids, playing with darts. And one eye was poked, so the other kid's father came and did the same thing. So from that, it became a full-blown war. To see this excavation bring that story alive is one of the most fascinating things I've seen. I mean, the stories we've heard and the evidence they're pulling out from Nunatak, it's no longer a legend, it's becoming a fact.
My name is Rick Connect, and I'm principal investigator of the project. We have 11 PhDs. We use a lot of student volunteers. We work with professional conservators to make it all happen. We've got Dr. Paul Ledger, who's working on the history of climate here. Dr. Veronique Forbes, who's an archaeoentomologist who studies insects. Dr. P.T. Ashlock, who's also a professional archaeologist from Southeast Alaska. Dr. Madonna Moss is from the University of Oregon, who specializes in faunal analysis.
There are mussel shells throughout this site. There's another bigger piece, and we don't know where they're coming from.
The Nunatak site was originally a village. Elders tell us that this site extended out about 200 feet. Since 2009, we've lost more than 30 feet on that piece of shoreline. And our 2009 and 2010 excavation blocks are completely gone already. It's very much a race against time. But this particular structure with a covered boardwalk running down the middle of it was an adaptation to the bow and arrow wars. That was a period of intense conflict between different native villages here in the YK Delta. And no one knew exactly when it had happened other than it happened before the Russians arrived. This collective communal house was burned down by attackers from another village up the Kuskokwim. We think it happened about 1640 based on carbon dates of the charred grass and so on the floor.
We've been excavating Nunatak for about 6 years now. I sent Rick a few pictures of artifacts I had from the locals. He came right over. He didn't even unpack. He went down the beach and they started walking and they started finding artifacts. Those first group was a tough bunch. There's these 3 students and a professor that come down and start looking for artifacts. Wind, rain, shine, they do it. My mind was saying, man, these guys are crazy. But they're trying to beat the erosions.
We get bugs, we get weather, we get wind, we get rain. Ouch, there's one now. And so they're pretty challenging conditions. We put in as many hours as we physically can, 12 to 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, just so we can get to it in time.
Pizza! Give me pizza!
Rick's just great. He doesn't stop. He's a perfect person for this site. I wouldn't have no one else run this site except him.
Well, I first came to Alaska to work as a graduate student in 1983, and luckily it was a preserved site much like this one in Kodiak. And that one was also eroding, and we worked hard to get a sample from that, but at the same time our assumption was there were going to be more sites like that, and the whole thing washed out. There wasn't even a rock, a firecrack rock left behind. That was shocking. And we ended up only getting a 10% sample at best, and that's not going to happen again. We're getting things that normally you just see in museum collections. We've got arrows with the feathers still lashed to them, grass rope that was used to make dog harnesses, that kind of preservation.
There's a piece of hair right here. I found that in my screen. PT found a ridiculously large amount of hair, and Bridget found another huge clump of hair today. It seems like when they cut their hair, they just let it fall wherever it wanted to, so. There's the lamp. The hair is kind of sticking out right there. It's all over the place, actually. There's been way hairier lamps, too. It's like, oh, you find hair, and you're like, oh, this is like a hair sample, and then you dig a little more, and then it's actually a lamp.
Bridget found an earring in the screen.
Yeah, that's definitely faunal.
Yeah. And then I would have it goes up to about there, I think. So I don't know how they actually wore them, like how it fit in.
Yeah, they kind of look like clip-ons.
Yeah.
I've heard that we're up to around 30,000 museum quality pieces, which will be coming back to Queen Hawk in 2017. We're hoping to get a cultural center built here, and then I'm hoping all the artifacts will remain in the village.
We estimate the site might have 5 to 10 years left, maximum. It could be lost in one big winter storm. It's like museums on fire or a library, and you have to rush in and save as many books and pieces of art as you can. And we're seeing things that people remember from their childhoods. Elders have a chance to reacquaint themselves and their children with tangible remains of their heritage.
Yeah, this project's been great. I'm just honored to be part of it, a small part of it.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at today's sea ice analysis, all the ice here well north of Point Barrow, and of course off to the east there, but kind of making an expansion to the west and also along the coast here, slowly growing sea ice with basically east-northeast winds, and so new ice forms and then gets blown in toward the coast, especially over toward Admiralty Bay, and that pattern is going to continue for the next 4 or 5 days. It's just very slow growth here along the eastern Beaufort Sea coast and also up here to the north. And for the coastal water forecast, small craft advisories on the south coast with those southerly winds and gale warnings on the north coast, 35 to 45 knots, 6 to 18 foot seas. Lynn Canal south 30 knots, 25 knots for Stevens Passage, southeast 20 for Clarence Strait. Outlook for Sunday, still south winds 30 knots for Lynn Canal, and small craft advisories here for both Clarence Strait and Stevens Passage with 5 foot seas, 25 to 30 knots on the south coast. Still carry some gales through much of the day here on the north coast, but up farther to the north, they turn west at 15, and seas running 15 or 12 to 18 feet along the coast. And for Prince William Sound, northeast, 40 knots tomorrow, seas 7 feet, good gales there, and winds coming down tomorrow behind that front, and as the low center lifts north or across the area there. So 30 knots for the eastern North Gulf Coast. You can see storm force winds just to the east there, south Cape Yakataga, out of the east. And Cook Inlet, south to southwest 15 to 20. Small craft advisory Kamishak Bay down to 20 knots with 10 foot seas for the Barren Islands. North 25 in the backside of that low for the western North Gulf Coast, 11 foot seas. And then for Sunday, much lighter winds for Prince William Sound down to east at 10, northeast 10 for the eastern North Gulf Coast. Easterlies 20 knots, western North Gulf Coast, small craft advisories, east 25, Barren Islands into Kamishak Bay, Cook Inlet, northeast 10 to 20 with 3 to 4 foot seas. Shelikof Strait tomorrow, southwest 20 knots, same thing on the east side of Kodiak Island. In fact, Sitkinak all the way down to Cape Sarachev, southwest 20 knots, seas 8 feet. Small craft advisories on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula, south 25, 9 foot seas, Bristol Bay south 20 with seas at 6 feet. East 30 knots the next day, again full gales coming back into the Alaska Peninsula. Out of the east-southeast, 35 to 40 knots, seas building toward 20 feet Pacific side, and 30 knot winds right up to Sitkinak and into Shelikof Strait, and the east side of Kodiak Island about 25 with 8 foot seas. Bristol Bay east increasing 30 knots, seas 8 feet. And for the Fox Islands tomorrow, 25 to 30 knot winds from the south-southeast. And then we got gale force winds out of the east-southeast. For the central Aleutians, 35 to 40 knots, seas about 15 feet. And then gales turn small crafts out of the northeast there for the far western Aleutians. Outlook for Sunday, swinging around to the northwest, 25 for that far western zone. Increasing to gale force here from about Kiska Island on over toward Adak. Good gales north to northwest, 35 to 40 across the central Aleutians. And gale force winds now mostly just north of Unalaska Island, otherwise southeast 30 knots. See kind of a low center here, so northeast and become northerly 20 to 25 knots across Umak Island. And for the southwest coast tomorrow, small craft advisories, south 30 knots, southeast 25, north of Nunivak Island, and east-southeast winds for Norton Sound and St. Lawrence Island at 20 knots, north 20 for St. Matthew Island, southwest 30, 11-foot seas for the Pribilofs. Sunday's outlook, southeast 20 Norton Sound, 25-knot winds here, Nunivak Island up across St. Lawrence Island, northeast 25 for St. Matthew Island, east 30 for the Pribilofs. Gales, southeasterly gales here, south of Nunivak Island. And for the Beaufort Sea coast, east 20 knots, 5 to 6 foot seas, about sums it up. Then from Cape Beaufort on down to Wales, winds will be 15 knots. And then on Sunday, east-northeast, 15 to 20 knots here, or 15 knots from Wales to Cape Thompson, all the way up to the central coast, northeast at 20, 15 knots on the east side, and then picking it back up to 20 toward demarcation point. For tonight, look for a few flurries and periods of fog here up along the Arctic coast. But anyway, winds diminish south central Alaska tonight and then start to come back up, especially over the eastern Gulf of Alaska tomorrow. This low pressure rolling northward, and the flood warning or flood advisory for the Resurrection River near Seward. Tomorrow, heavy rain shifts eastward and winds diminish, stays unsettled here over the southwest coast. Next storm into the Aleutians on Sunday. It stays south of the chain there, but a good gradient wind and rain into the right along the southwest coast, rain into the Panhandle, drier over the interior.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.